I jolted awake at 3:17 a.m. to a strange blue light pulsating in the corner of my bedroom. My heart pounded against my ribs as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The air felt charged, almost electric, and a weight pressed against my chest, making it nearly impossible to breathe. I wasn't alone. What happened next would completely transform my understanding of the spiritual realm and fasting. The heavenly messenger who appeared in my room that night revealed something so profound that it has altered the course of my spiritual journey forever. My name is James Robertson, and I'm 62 years old from a small town outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I've been a man of faith for most of my adult life, but nothing prepared me for what I'm about to share with you. Before I continue with my testimony, please write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this account of mine is reaching. I'm still amazed at how God has used this experience to touch lives around the world. Growing up in a traditional Christian home, I always believed in angels, but in an abstract, distant way. They were Bible characters, beautiful paintings in church windows, not beings that could manifest in my bedroom on an ordinary Tuesday night. That changed dramatically last summer during what began as a personal spiritual discipline but ended as a supernatural encounter I still struggle to put into words. It started with a sense of spiritual dryness that had been growing for months. My prayers felt hollow, like they were hitting the ceiling and bouncing back. I'd been attending church faithfully for decades, reading my Bible daily, but something was missing. A depth, a connection. That vital sense of God's presence that had once been so real to me. After a particularly frustrating Sunday service where I felt absolutely nothing, I decided to try something I hadn't done in years, a dedicated fast, not just skipping lunch, but a serious extended period of abstaining from food to seek God more intently. I remembered how fasting had been a powerful spiritual discipline throughout biblical history, but I'd neglected it in my comfortable American lifestyle. I decided on a 7-day water fast, ambitious for someone who hadn't fasted in over a decade. My wife thought I was crazy. "At your age? With your blood pressure?" she protested. But something inside me knew this was necessary. Little did I know that this decision would crack open a door between realms. The first 3 days were exactly what you'd expect. Hunger pangs, irritability, caffeine withdrawal headaches. Nothing spiritual, just physical discomfort that made me question my decision hourly. By day 4, something shifted. The hunger became background noise, and an unusual clarity began to emerge. That night I dreamed of an ancient door. Weathered wood, iron hinges, standing alone in an empty field. In the dream, I knew with absolute certainty that something important waited on the other side, but I had no key. I woke feeling both refreshed and frustrated. What was my mind trying to tell me? Day 5 of my fast brought an unexpected peace. My body had adjusted somewhat, and while physically weaker, I felt a strange new mental sharpness. Colors seemed brighter. Music at church that morning moved me to tears. My wife noticed the change, commenting that I seemed different somehow. I couldn't explain it properly, but barriers were thinning. That evening during prayer, I felt a presence in the room for the first time. Not threatening, but definitely there. Like when you know someone has entered a room even with your eyes closed. I opened my eyes, saw nothing, but the feeling remained. I continued praying. My heart rate elevated until eventually the sensation faded. I told no one about this experience, not even my wife. Part of me worried I was simply experiencing the effects of low blood sugar or dehydration. Another part wondered if something much more significant was happening. Either way, I decided to continue the fast. Day 6 was the hardest physically. My energy levels plummeted, and walking up the stairs left me winded. My wife again urged me to reconsider, but I was determined to complete what I'd started. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual, utterly exhausted, but with a strange anticipation I couldn't explain. I remember checking the bedside clock, 11:42 p.m., before falling into a deep sleep. But something would wake me just a few hours later that would change everything. The blue light was what woke me at exactly 3:17 a.m. At first, I thought it might be my phone, but this light pulsated with life, expanding and contracting like a heartbeat. As my eyes adjusted, I realized it was concentrated in the corner of my bedroom, near the reading chair where I had my morning devotions. I tried to wake my wife but found myself completely paralyzed, not in a frightening way. There was no sense of danger, but as if my body was being gently held in place. The light began to take form, coalescing into a tall, luminous figure that towered nearly to the ceiling. James. The voice didn't come through my ears, but seemed to resonate directly in my mind. Clear as a bell, yet without sound. I wasn't dreaming. I was fully conscious, aware of the weight of my blanket, the familiar smell of our bedroom, the soft breathing of my wife beside me. The figure stepped forward, and I could make out features that were simultaneously human and not. Male in appearance, with eyes that held galaxies. Not metaphorically. I could actually see swirling stars in his gaze. His form was draped in what appeared to be light itself, folded and flowing like fabric. "Do not be afraid," he said, which of course made my heart race even faster. "I have been sent because of your seeking." His voice carried authority without harshness, power without intimidation. "Who are you?" I managed to think, discovering I could communicate mentally even while physically mute. "I am Jophiel," he replied. "A messenger. Your fast has created an opening that allows this connection." I had so many questions, but before I could form them clearly, he continued, "What you do not understand about fasting is its true purpose. It is not deprivation. It is not merely discipline. It is alignment." As he spoke, a vision opened before me. I saw the human body as a complex network of light, not just physical systems, but spiritual channels. When these channels became cluttered or blocked by various forms of excess and distraction, the connection with the divine became muffled, like a radio with static. Fasting, Jophiel explained, is not about earning God's attention. It is about clearing the interference that prevents you from perceiving what is already there. The veil between worlds is thinner than you know. What Jophiel revealed next about fasting transformed my understanding completely. Your physical body, he continued, exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions. What you eat, what you consume with your eyes and ears, creates resonance patterns that either harmonize with or disrupt your spiritual perception. He showed me how the act of willingly abstaining from food wasn't just a symbolic sacrifice or a way to focus prayers. It was a literal recalibration of my multidimensional being. The secret wasn't in the hunger, it was in the surrender that fasting represented. In heaven, Jophiel said, there is perfect alignment between will and action, between desire and purpose. No discord, no static. Fasting temporarily recreates this alignment in your earthly vessel. It is practice for eternity. I saw in that moment how my week of fasting had been gradually stripping away layers of interference, not just physical, but spiritual static that had accumulated through months of comfortable, distracted living. But there is more, the angel continued. Fasting creates vacancies that can be filled. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the spirit realm. What you choose to fill these spaces with determines what grows within you. He showed me how many people fast without seeing spiritual breakthrough, because they create the vacancy but fill it with worry, religious performance, or self-focused spiritual ambition rather than simple presence and surrender. The secret of fasting, he said, is that it is not about emptying alone, but about what you invite into that emptiness. Not all hunger leads to fulfillment. As he spoke these words, I felt something being placed in my hands, not physically, but in the vision. It was a key, glowing with the same blue light that surrounded Jophiel. Immediately, I recognized it as the key to the door from my dream. This knowledge has always been available, Jophiel said, but few have eyes to perceive it. The kingdom operates on principles as consistent as your physical laws, yet most stumble through life unaware. Jophiel's countenance suddenly grew more serious. There is danger in this knowledge if wielded with wrong intent. Many seek spiritual experiences for their own sake, collecting them like trophies. Others use disciplines like fasting as currency, attempting to purchase God's favor or power. I felt a chill as he continued. These approaches lead to deception. The enemy of your soul can mimic experiences, can offer counterfeit revelations. Discernment is essential. He showed me people who had opened spiritual doors through various practices, but lacked the wisdom to navigate what came through them. The image was troubling. Light that appeared golden but carried a sickly undertone, beings that appeared angelic but lacked the peace and authority I felt in Jophiel's presence. "How can I know the difference?" I asked, feeling the weight of this warning. "By their fruits," he replied simply. "True encounters with heaven produce increased love, humility, and surrender. False experiences produce pride, exclusivity, and obsession. The first draws you toward others in service. The second separates you in spiritual superiority." This warning felt like a sacred trust, knowledge being handed down with both promise and caution. I understood then why such experiences weren't more common. Not because they weren't possible, but because they required a foundation of character and discernment to navigate safely. "Why me?" I finally managed to ask. "I'm no one special. There are people with greater faith, greater understanding." Jophiel smiled then, a smile that felt like sunrise after a long night. "It is precisely your awareness of your ordinariness that makes you a suitable vessel. Pride is the greatest barrier between worlds. Your humility and genuine seeking created space for this encounter." What he said next stunned me completely. "This revelation is not for you alone. You are to share what you have learned." A wave of insecurity washed over me. "No one will believe me. They'll think I'm crazy or seeking attention." "Some will dismiss your words," Jophiel acknowledged. "Others will recognize truth when they hear it. Your task is not to convince, but to convey. The Spirit will do the rest." He showed me people who would be impacted by this message. Individuals I'd never met, in places I'd never been. People who had been fasting and praying without understanding the deeper mechanics of what they were participating in. People who stood at crossroads similar to mine, seeking deeper connection. "Your obedience in sharing creates bridges for others," he explained. "Not everyone experiences direct revelation, but all can benefit from it when it's shared with pure intent." I felt both honored and terrified by this commission. Who was I to speak of such things? And yet the conviction that this message needed to be shared grew stronger within me. As quickly as it began, I sensed the encounter drawing to a close. The blue light began to pulse more rapidly, and Jophiel stepped back toward the corner where he had first appeared. "Remember," he said, "what you have experienced is not the goal, but a means. The purpose of all revelation is deeper communion, with God and with one another. Guard against making the experience itself an idol." His form began to fade, the light diminishing gradually. But before he disappeared completely, he shared one final insight that I've carried with me every day since. Fasting creates space, but love fills it. Without love, all spiritual disciplines are empty rituals. With love, even the simplest acts become sacred pathways. And then he was gone. The blue light vanished, and my bedroom returned to darkness. The clock read 3:33 a.m. Only 16 minutes had passed, though it felt like hours. I found I could move again and immediately reached for my wife, who stirred and mumbled something about letting her sleep. I didn't wake her. Some experiences need to be processed alone first. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. How could I? I sat in the reading chair, the very spot where the angel had appeared, and wrote everything down while it was still fresh, afraid I might wake up and think it was all a dream. The morning after my encounter, everything looked different. Colors were more vibrant, sounds more distinct. I felt a clarity and peace unlike anything I'd experienced before. My wife noticed immediately, asking what had happened. When I told her, she didn't dismiss it as I'd feared, but listened with quiet attention. "You're different," was all she said when I finished my account. "Something has changed." I completed the 7th day of my fast with a new understanding of what I was doing. It wasn't just about abstaining from food anymore. It was about consciously creating space and then intentionally filling that space with God's presence. When I broke the fast the following day, I did so with reverence, aware now that even eating could be a sacred act when done with gratitude and awareness. Food tasted more vivid, more alive than I remembered. In the weeks that followed, I began cautiously sharing my experience with trusted friends. Some were skeptical but respectful. Others shared that they'd had their own unusual encounters during times of fasting and prayer, but had been afraid to speak of them. One friend, a pastor of 40 years, confided that he'd had a similar visitation decades ago that had fundamentally shaped his ministry, but he rarely spoke of it for fear of being misunderstood or appearing to seek attention. I realized then how many people might be carrying profound spiritual experiences in silence, unsure of how or whether to share them. As I reflect on what happened that night and what Jophiel revealed about fasting, I'm struck by how practical this spiritual insight actually is. Fasting isn't mystical manipulation or spiritual performance. It's a practical tool for clearing internal static and creating space for greater clarity and connection. The principles work, whether you believe my encounter or not. Test it yourself. Create intentional emptiness through fasting, from food, from media, from whatever creates noise in your life, and then be deliberate about what you allow to fill that space. I've discovered that the key Jophiel showed me in my vision unlocks a door available to everyone. The barrier between heaven and earth is indeed thinner than most realize, not requiring special anointing or spiritual pedigree to pierce. Simple surrender, genuine seeking, and the courage to be quiet enough to listen are the requirements. What would change in your life if you approached fasting not as a way to get something from God, but as a way to clear the interference preventing you from recognizing what's already available? What might you hear in the silence that the noise of everyday life drowns out? I don't claim special status because of this experience. If anything, it has humbled me, showing me how much I still don't understand about the spiritual realm despite decades of faith. But it has also emboldened me to speak of things I might previously have kept private. This experience has forever changed how I view the connection between physical disciplines and spiritual realities. Fasting is now a regular part of my spiritual practice, not constantly but intentionally, creating space for clearer connection. If this testimony resonates with you, I encourage you to share it with someone who might benefit. These insights weren't given to me to keep to myself, and I believe many are hungry for authentic spiritual experience beyond religious routine. And stay connected, because in my next video, I'll be sharing another extraordinary angelic encounter that revealed how our prayers actually travel through the spiritual realm and what obstacles can prevent them from being answered. The warfare around our prayer life is more real and strategic than most believers ever realize. What questions do you have about fasting or angelic encounters? Drop them in the comments below, and remember, the veil is thin for those with eyes to see and ears to hear.